Guys, welcome into another episode of the Wolverine Live Recruiting Show. I'm your host, EJ Holland with the Wolverine.com. If you're not a subscriber to the Wolverine.com, you can subscribe today for $1 for 1 month. Also, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel for free. Tonight's episode is sponsored by My Perfect Franchise. Are you a displaced corporate executive or wanting to put your career in your own hands? Or are you an experienced entrepreneur wanting to diversify? Well, Andy Luedecke can help. Andy is a huge college sports fan and franchise veteran, having owned multiple franchises and businesses. Using his expertise, he helps others find their American dream through a very thorough consultation and evaluation process. Call Andy, put your life and career in your own hands. Best of all, his services are 100% free to you. So what do you have to lose? So yeah, Andy does a terrific job. I think that the franchise business is interesting. Like I said on the previous show, I definitely love to learn more about potentially owning some Chick-fil-A's, maybe bringing Whataburger to Virginia or Portillo's. I definitely missed that. So don't miss your shot at getting into the franchise business. I heard there's a Chick-fil-A opening in Ann Arbor, so maybe you guys can get into the Chick-fil-A business before it booms throughout the area. But find your perfect franchise at myperfectfranchise.net. That's 404-973-9901 or myperfectfranchise.net to learn more about Andy and My Perfect Franchise. All right, guys, like I said, welcome into the show. For everybody just filing in, we're going to answer all questions tonight. If you want to skip the line, hit us with a super chat. We already have one from Devon Robinson. So shout out to Devon for donating to tonight's show. That money goes directly to my travel budget so I can go around the country and see top Michigan targets and commits. And he says, honestly, I think we need a two quarterback class. Who's the most realistic second quarterback? So I actually wrote over at the Wolverine a big piece on what's kind of next for quarterback recruiting. And just because Michigan landed Carter Smith doesn't mean they aren't going to explore other quarterbacks. Obviously, they're still in the mix with Bryce Underwood, right? But in terms of most realistic, I guess I'll answer that in a second. Look, for those of you that missed yesterday's show or haven't read it up with the content, they are still pursuing Bryce Underwood. Michigan's still in that top two, I would say, along with LSU. So, he's still an option, and he's not completely off the board. I don't think Carter Smith is going to scare away Bryce Underwood. It's not a signal of a white flag from Michigan either. So Bryce Underwood is still an option. The Wolverines are still working to get him on campus for the game against Ohio State. Remember, that game falls around his state championship schedule if Belleville advances this weekend, which they are expected to. But the hope is he still makes it in that Saturday, and they're going to continue to recruit him hard until he makes his decision in January. With that said, I would still give LSU the edge here. I mean, he had a great visit earlier this fall. He's been really impressed with what Jaden Daniels has done there, and he's always had a wandering eye for the SEC. So, aside from him, Michigan's still in the mix with George McIntyre, a fellow five-star, but he's always been kind of considered a long shot. Michigan's recruited four-star guys like Ryan Montgomery and Bear Bachmeier, but they've kind of faded a bit, and it doesn't seem like either would be super open to being part of a two-quarterback class. The one guy that I think comes to mind that I mentioned over at the Wolverine is Husan Longstreet. He's another really interesting quarterback. I sat down and I watched this film a couple of weeks ago, and I talked about it on this show. He's built like Jaden Davis in terms of, stature. He's a little bit of a shorter quarterback at 6'1.5", 185. So pretty much same measurables as Davis. Davis a little heavier, but Longstreet is more mobile. He does offer, some elusiveness inside, outside of the pocket, and the ability to make plays with his legs. But unlike Davis, he's not as polished of a passer. He does some really weird things when it comes to throwing the football. His release points are a little bit all over the place. He does a lot of off-platform stuff. He's just not a super, dialed in, accurate short to intermediate passer like Davis is. But again, he does offer that upside as a runner. So I think in Longstreet and Smith, you would have two guys that are really intriguing, really upside guys. And you see Michigan actually has the lead on the On3 recruiting prediction machine. He hasn't taken a ton of visits, but he was on campus in May and then threw in front of Kurt Campbell at Michigan satellite camp at Wayne State the following day. So he's still one to keep an eye on. I think, they're going to go all in on Underwood. And then once Underwood makes his decision in January, they'll decide how to proceed with 2025 quarterback recruiting. And they do miss on Underwood, there's also a chance they kind of punt on the other 2025 quarterbacks unless somebody pops up that they really, really like. Now, again, Campbell's always been a fan of Longstreet, so that is a guy they like. But they could just, go towards the portal instead. I also wrote today, Michigan could potentially pull two quarterbacks out of the portal. And me and Zach talked about it on yesterday's show. Just the moving parts, right? You have JJ McCarthy who could potentially make the leap to the NFL. You have guys that were, more project types that could change positions like Alex Orji or Kendrick Bell. You have guys that, could leave in terms of, attrition. So, two quarterbacks in the portal isn't something that's super crazy to think about. And instead of taking another 2025 guy, you could just have multiple portal quarterbacks. And then next year you just do it again. The portal has been more friendly to Michigan in terms of NIL as well. They haven't struggled as much, or it hasn't been much of a hindrance, in the portal as it has on the recruiting trail. So, right now, I think the plan right now is to continue to recruit Underwood all the way up until he makes his decision, see what he decides. If he jumps in the class, great. If he doesn't, see how to proceed with 25 quarterbacks. And then regardless of what happens with all these guys, and regardless of whether or not JJ stays, I still think they explore the portal for another quarterback. So that's a long-winded answer for that super chat. We actually have another super chat coming in from Jim Printable. So shout out to you, Jim. Again, these super chats allow you to skip the line and they go directly to my travel budget so I can see top Michigan targets and commits across the country. And he says, EJ, what top linebackers and running backs do we have a real shot with in 2025? I appreciate the show. Keep up the great work. We appreciate you, Jim, with your big super chat. Running backs, tough, man. I kind of expressed some concern about running back recruiting. I think it was last week or the week before. But, running back targets have just flown off the board as of late. We do this thing called the master list in our Wolverine magazine. We still have a print edition. We kind of keep an offer tracker type of thing. And so it's really helpful because it helps me see guys that, eliminate Michigan or commit elsewhere, etc. And, that you've had so many highly touted guys just eliminate Michigan, from, Jordan Davison to Harlem Berry to Gideon Davidson. There's just been so many of these top 100 backs that I've already committed elsewhere, dropped the top schools list without Michigan. So, I was very critical of Mike Hart early on in his tenure. And then he came back and landed Jordan Marshall this cycle, and he was really active on the recruiting trail. And recently he's been really, really quiet, and you've seen these running backs start looking elsewhere, and it's still kind of head scratching. If you're a top tier running back, you'd think that you'd want to play for Mike Hart. You'd want to play at Michigan. So it's kind of frustrating. I don't want to jump off the Mike Hart bandwagon when I just got on it after he did such a great job with Jordan Marshall, but it is a little concerning early on. So we'll see what he does there. But The more realistic guys, I guess, or the most realistic, highly touted guy at the running back position that I think Michigan can land is Iverson Howard. He is ranked in the top 300 on three. I actually just saw him this past weekend. He's more of a Donovan Edwards, Micah Cobb kind of type in the sense that he can split out wide and play some receiver. He can line up in the slot. You can use him as a kick returner, punt returner type of guy as well. Just a really speedy back that can still fill out a little bit at 5'10", 180 pounds. And you see his rankings are kind of all over the place. He's a 3-star in the industry, but like I said, On Three has him in the top 300. ESPN has him in the top 200, and the other two have him as a 3-star. But he is a guy that Mike Hart really likes. He visited in the spring, told me he hasn't, been able to get back to Michigan for a game, but said that Michigan is still very, very high on his list. So I would say Iverson Howard is the running back that Michigan has the best shot with. There are some other highly touted guys, like Bo Jackson's a top 200 guy out of Ohio, but he's a heavy Ohio State lean. On 300 athlete, Marquise Davis, I think, can be a running back at the next level, but he's also considered an Ohio State lean. And then after that, it's just more 3-star type of guys. Like the only other running back that they've gotten on campus that I have marked down is Chad Gasper, who's a 3-star back out of Texas. When Mike Hart made that swing through the Houston area, he did a really nice job with Gasper, but not a lot of highly touted backs at the running back position. Now, linebackers, where it's at next cycle. Linebacker has so many big-time guys. I'm going to read off guys that have visited that are like top 150 guys. You have Riley Pettijohn, who's my personal favorite, out of McKinney, Texas. He visited for the spring game, 6'3", 215 pounds. Reminds me a little bit of Junior Colson. You have Noah McHale out of California, who visited as well. He's a top 50 talent. You have Elijah Melendez, who's a top 50 talent and is coming in for the game against Ohio State. And then you have guys that haven't visited but are planning to visit, like Kamar Archie, top 100 prospect, who's a teammate of Owen Wafel, Michigan's defensive line commit for this cycle. Another one of my favorites there, Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, a top 150 guy out of IMG, who has a strong connection to Mike Elston. His older brother was actually recruited by Elston at Notre Dame. And there's just so many other names. Like I could go on the whole show about linebackers. Like there are a lot of linebackers. I mean, some other guys that I really like that aren't in that top 150 that I visited. Anthony Saka out of St. Joe's Prep. You have Justin Rowe out of Asheville School in North Carolina, who's been drawing some comparisons to Jaden Smith. So, all the names I read have visited or are planning to visit or have some type of tie. There are just so many big time linebackers in 2025, a really, really strong year at that position. So really pivotal year for Jesse Minter and Chris Partridge. All right, let's go down to John A. Schultz. And he was actually here first, bright and early at 5 p.m. He says, EJ, should Michigan fans be worried about 25 commit Bobby Canka making a visit to Tennessee this weekend? It would be a bad look to lose an in-state commit. Not really. I mean, it's interesting that he's visiting Tennessee, but I'm not overly concerned there. He committed to Michigan early for a reason. He was considered a Michigan lean for a while before he pulled the trigger. Maybe he's just giving himself some other options because he's young and there are some question marks around the program. But, I'm not too concerned. And, losing an in-state commit because it's a bad look isn't of concern to me either. I mean, Bobby Canka is a really good player, but there are so many Bobby Cankas out there, so many Bobby Canka types out there. You've seen Michigan land this type of player the last few cycles, whether it's Ted Hammond or Manuel Beagle or Brooks Barr, and now Canka. They're all kind of in the same mold. Even, other top targets in this class like Cole Breeler fit that mold as well. So, I'm not really concerned about it one way or the other. I think Canka is pretty solid though. Schultz also says, EJ, I heard from another site, the Oompa Loompa, that Avery Gak was close to committing, but wanted assurances that Sharon Moore would be around. If Moore takes a head coaching job, would we lose offensive line commits? Yeah, I mean, if every rumor in the factory was true, everybody would be close to committing to Michigan. But look, I think the Wolverines have done a great job with Gak. I actually don't think he's that far off there. I think, if I were to pick a school today, it'd probably be Michigan, even though a couple months ago it seemed like, Gak preferred Ohio State and maybe even Georgia. But these recent visits have really, really moved the needle for Gak. Whether Moore stays or not, obviously, is going to be a big factor for Gak. I think if Jim Harbaugh stays, Moore is going to attract a lot of interest as a potential head coach. And yeah, that will have an effect on him and other offensive line recruits in 2025. I think Michigan's trending well for, some of those top targets like Gak, like, Will Black, Rowan Byrne, etc. And they've gotten all those guys on campus. So yeah, I mean, losing Moore would be terrible, I guess, not just from an offensive line recruiting standpoint, but overall recruiting. I mean, Moore's always been one of the best recruiters on staff and just has a lot of ties in the Midwest and has built, ties all over the country as well since becoming the offensive line coach. So, it would definitely be detrimental to lose him. But as things stand right now, Moore's done a great job, and we'll see how the offseason shakes out with him in terms of current commits. Those guys are going to sign before any decisions are made. So not really worried about 24. Let's go down to Ben Ricketts, and he says, who would be your comp for Carter Smith, and who might be some guys that he'll recruit? Also, Michigan misses out on Underwood, who might be a solid quarterback too to pair with Smith. So the second question we kind of answered earlier, Husan Longstreet would probably be the most realistic guy. But, more so likely that Michigan hits the portal. As far as who would be my comp, yeah, I've really struggled with that question. I actually was on the phone with Carter's coach last night, and I asked him this question, and he couldn't come up with a comp for me. He said, he thought maybe Bo Nix, and then retracted it and gave a non-answer. And that's kind of how I feel about this question. It's really tough to give a player comp for Carter Smith. I don't think there's a real good one. I mean, the guys I've thought of are Jeff Hostetler, who's an old school quarterback that won a couple of Super Bowls with the New York Giants, but isn't a real big name. And then more recently, a Colin Klein type of guy. I mean, just because Carter Smith is that type of threat with his legs, he's not a super polished passer, but he does have a live arm. He throws a 90-mile-per-hour fastball on the baseball diamond. And that's the thing with Carter. I had someone bring up today, well, his throwing motion super weird and his release point super weird. It's not that it's weird. It's just a baseball type of motion. He's played baseball his entire life. His dad, I believe, was a Major League Baseball player. So, yeah, I think that, his mechanics will be fixed at the next level. And Carter's best days as a passer are definitely ahead of him right now. He's a really special athlete, though, that can make a lot of things happen with his legs as a, whether it's a design run for him or just being a creator in and out of the pocket. There's a lot to like about Carter Smith's ceiling. And I think right now it's hard to make a true player comparison, as far as Michigan quarterbacks, obviously, some around the program feel like he shares some traits with JJ McCarthy. Now, JJ was, far better as a passer at this point in his recruitment, but JJ had also been, training as a quarterback since forever, and had personal quarterback trainers and all of that good stuff. But I think the player comparison to JJ, or the trait comparison to JJ, is more so his dynamic ability as a runner, his ability to create, just being an exciting pizzazz type player, which you don't necessarily have coming in with Jaden Davis, who's more of that polished passer who's really short, or not really, he is short, but I was trying to say he's really accurate, short to intermediate. And he's a great field general, and he's a great mental processor, and he understands the game, and he has a really high floor. With players like Carter and JJ, you see this ceiling, you see the exciting play, and it gets you really excited. So when you hear the JJ comps, it's not a direct comp in terms of like this guy's a similar passer as JJ. It's more of this guy's just as exciting of a player as JJ. So yeah, I mean, that's another long-winded answer to give a non-answer, basically, because it is tough to come up with a comparison for Carter. Let's go down to Ben Ricketts, and he says, this might be a question to address in a month, but as the coaching carousel moves quickly, who might be some flip targets? A month from now is National Signing Day, so we can't really sit and wait, I guess. We have to see how things progress on a daily basis. Obviously, the big one that popped up this week is Boise State parted ways with their head coach. And so that opens the opportunity for Michigan to circle back. And they had already been circling back to him, but it opens the door even more to have a real opportunity with Gatlin Bear, top 100 wide receiver out of Idaho. I think Michigan finished second in that recruitment when he originally decided to stay home and committed to Boise State. He's, just a dynamic playmaker, 6'2", 180 pounds, runs in the 10.2s in the 100 meter, which is crazy fast. I mean, faster than Nicholas Harbaugh from last cycle. He would be such a great addition late, and like typical Ron Bellamy fashion, like stealing a big time receiver late, like he did with Darius Clemens and Carmelo English. So, Gatlin Bear is definitely one to watch now as a real flip target. The thing about Gatlin is, like Andrew Gentry, he's going on a 2-year mission. So even if he were to stick with Boise, or he were to flip to Michigan, or Oregon's another option. Oregon just had him on campus for a visit, and, they're a real threat to flip him as well. Whichever school he ends up committing to on signing day in December, Bear doesn't sign a national letter of intent. He actually signs a financial aid agreement. And then 2 years from now in 2026, he's basically free to sign wherever. So there's still a long way to go in this recruitment, because he is a mission kid. So, we'll see. As far as other flip targets because of coach movement, I don't think, there's guys like Nigel Tuggle and stuff, but obviously Kirby's not in any danger. So yeah, I mean, that's the one that definitely comes to mind. I know some people have asked about A&M commits because they parted ways with Jimbo Fisher, but I just don't think a lot of those A&M commits fit what Michigan is looking for, especially in the NIL era. And kind of the same thing with Florida. They haven't, made a firing there, but obviously they're on a downhill skid. They just lost another commit today. Even Aaron Childs, who was a Michigan lean early on, I'm not sure they circle back there. So Gatlin Bear's the one that comes to mind in terms of coaching carousel right now. Tyson Smith says, who's the best, most realistic wide receiver that Michigan can pair Smith with? Probably Andrew Marsh, 4-star wide receiver out of Texas, ranked as a top 50 guy nationally. And I know you're going to say, oh, that's not really realistic. Well, Marsh has visited twice already. He's coming back for a third time if he doesn't have a playoff game for the game against Ohio State later this month. I mean, that's a lot of visits. I think that qualifies as having legitimate interest. I know his mom works in the school system, and the family is really high on education and likes what Michigan can offer on and off the field. But I think with Marsh, man, like, it's just going to be tough to pull him from the state of Texas. Obviously, you have schools like LSU and Texas and Oklahoma all involved for him as well. But I mean, the amount of times he's visited, I think that there's legitimate interest with him. And then some other guys that, have legitimate interest that are top 100 guys. Quincy Porter, fits that mold of what Michigan's looking for as that big outside receiver. I saw him earlier this season, and he was extremely impressive. 6'3", 190 pounds, was on campus for the barbecue, and Michigan's working to get him back on campus soon. And there you see Quincy's profile. Quincy's just not talked a lot about because the dude is very quiet, and I could tell he hated doing that interview with me when I went out to see him. So just about his business, and that's completely fine, man. I love this kid as a football player. I don't care if he does interviews with me at all. He's so fun to watch, man. He's extremely dominant. I mean, literally like watching Terrell Owens would be like my player comp for him. Like the yards after catch, the jump ball ability as well. But what made T.O. special is just that yards after catch, being able to run through tackles in the open field and things of that nature. And Quincy can do that, but he also knows how to use his size to his advantage, not only in the red zone, but just overall. And he's really tactical route runner as well. And he's still kind of slender at 190. Like, I really think he can bulk up and look like a TO type. So he's one of, if I were Michigan or if I were a Michigan fan, Quincy Porter would be one of my most wanted guys. Like he's that guy. And then Talon Taylor would be the next top 100 guy I would give Michigan a true shot with out of Chicagoland. He comes from the Midwest Boom program, which is one of the best 7-on-7 and training programs in the country. Produced guys like JJ McCarthy and Tyler Morris. I know that Talon Taylor's family is close with the Morris family, so that should help Michigan early on. He's already visited twice. He was at the spring game. He came back during the barbecue weekend, and now he'll be back for the Ohio State game as well. So 3 visits there. I know some Notre Dame fans feel pretty confident about landing Talon Taylor, and they've let me know in my mentions, as they always do, because they're weird little guys. But I think Michigan has a great shot with Talon Taylor. I think Ron Bellamy's done a fantastic job in this recruitment. I think a win over Ohio State would go a long way with him. And I saw him in the fall as well, and another really impressive looking prospect. Let's go down to Go Blue 81. And he says, are there any 5-star running backs that we can pair with Smith like we did JJ and the Don? I kind of answered that earlier, Go Blue 81. I mean, running back recruiting is a little disappointing to start off in 2025 with Iverson Howard being the most realistic, highest ranked guy, but maybe Michigan can make some things shake with the dudes over in Ohio. Marquise Davis, big fan of him. Bo Jackson's visited at least, but both seem to be leaning towards Ohio State right now. Tyson Smith back with another one. He says, is Carter Smith better than Jaden Davis? I have them ranked kind of in a similar range. Like I said, I had Carter Smith in the top 100 to 150 range. I have Jaden Davis in the top 125 to 175 range. So not a big gap there. I give Carter the edge because I just, I prefer a high ceiling, right? It's all about preference when you're looking at quarterbacks. Some guys might prefer the higher floor of Jaden Davis, the more polished passer, the more accomplished quarterback, the more cerebral type of guy. Not saying that Carter's not a smart guy, but Jaden Davis has just been bred to play quarterback since he was, a youth. With Carter Smith, I think he's a smart guy. He's been a starter at his high school since he was a freshman. But I think with Carter, that athletic ability gives him more upside for sure. He still has, a ways to go as a passer, but I think the things that he does can be corrected with proper teaching at the next level. But when you look at Carter Smith's just ceiling and the baseline you get from him as a runner, there's a lot to like about what he can become. So I personally would give Smith the edge over Davis, not by a lot, but just because I'm excited about the ceiling, right? And I want to have a ceiling to be excited about, and I prefer the ceiling as opposed to the really high floor. But the high floor also has Davis, still in that similar type of range. But I think On3 has it right with Carter Smith. They're the highest on him right now. And I think Smith is going to rise up the rankings. Remember, Davis was like a top 25 prospect at this point in the process. And I was actually very high on him as well. And then he kind of peaked and continued to tumble down the rankings. With Smith, it's going to be the opposite. Like, he's nowhere near his potential at this point. He's rated on the lower side right now. He has nowhere to go but up. I think he's going to continue to rise in the rankings throughout the process. Let's go down to Tyson Smith again. He says, I saw top 100 cornerback Dwayne Galloway visited Michigan for Purdue. Can we actually get him from Ohio? We missed on West and Scott. Are we wasting time? Well, Ohio State hasn't offered Dwayne Galloway, so I think Michigan's in a great spot right now. Steve Klinkscale isn't going to shy away from recruiting the state of Ohio just because he lost out on Aaron Scott and Bryce West. He still has really strong connections there. He has made Galloway an early priority. Galloway's absolutely exploded on the recruiting trail, but he did visit for the game against Purdue. The Wolverines hold the edge on the on-3 recruiting prediction machine with a 43% chance of landing him. I think, it'll be interesting to see if Ohio State does offer him, what happens there, since not only is he an Ohio kid, he's a Columbus kid, but maybe he takes the attitude of, hey, Michigan believed in me first. And he looks at guys like Rod Moore and says, I can definitely have success at Michigan and be on the other side of the rivalry. Maybe Jordan Marshall, serves as an inspiration there, as well as a guy who was, a top 100 kid who spurred Ohio State. And if Michigan beats Ohio State and he's there later this month, that can only help as well. So I don't think they're wasting time with Galloway. Tyson Smith's last question says, what sport would you cover if you didn't cover football? That's a tough question, man, because I don't really watch a lot of other sports. And I don't really watch a lot of football either, because I take that back. I watch a lot of football, obviously, like I'm on the road all the time. So I think I'm on game 36 this weekend. Yeah, like 36 or something like that. So I don't think anybody gets to more high school games than I do, and practices and 7-on-7s and all that. But, watching all that stuff kind of burns me out. And I'm always out at high school games on Saturdays. So I never watch college football. Like, I've maybe watched a half of Michigan football this year, or any football. Like, the only full game I watched was like Colorado State, because I watched it on a plane and they forced us to watch it for some reason. Like, it was the only thing showing on that monitor. But yeah, I mean, so the only other sports I really watch are boxing. Like I've mentioned that before. Big boxing fan. Big boxing match tomorrow night. Shakur Stevenson, Emmanuel Navarrete, doubleheader on ESPN. So if you don't watch boxing, definitely watch those matchups tomorrow. And then I watch soccer, but only like Euros and World Cups. Like, I can't really get into the league stuff, but I will watch the international tournaments. But outside of that, I don't know, man. I don't think I would be covering sports. I would just be reporting on something else, some weird stuff like ghost hunting and going to find Bigfoot and things of that nature, I guess. Let's go down to Ben Ricketts, and he says, oh man, I didn't even realize we were over time. All right, let's go rapid fire. And he says, since Michigan is anticipating several players to leave for the draft, do you think they will look to add up to 5 more high school commits to this class, or bank on several scholarships for the portal? I think they'll take a few more, maybe get up to 27, 28, and then they'll bank those scholarships for the portal. Yeah, I think they'll be pretty active in the portal again. Barry L says, what is your opinion of Michigan going after Cam Rising if healthy and goes into the transfer portal, assuming JJ leaves? Well, I can't answer that question because I covered Cameron Rising extensively as a recruit because he was committed to Texas. I loved Cameron Rising. Cameron Rising, fun fact, was part of a 2-quarterback class at the University of Texas. And I always thought he was the better of the two. The thing about Rising was he was always hurt. Like, I never got to see Rising throw live because he was always injured. But like the stuff he put on tape, I was like, man, I love this dude. And he had that like California gunslinger with the mustache and stuff. I was a big Cameron Rising guy. I thought Tom Herman did an excellent job of going out to California and finding him. He just never stayed healthy. And like, he still apparently doesn't stay healthy, but when he's on the field, he's pretty much a baller, man. So big Cameron Rising fan here, been a Cameron Rising fan since he was an underclassman. So yeah, I would love to see it if he's healthy and he can stay healthy. Maybe Ben Herbert can work some of his magic. Then, that would be an amazing land for Michigan for sure. I do love Cam Rising. And like I said, I'll always love Cam Rising. Let's see. Malachi says, do you think the 25 class will be better than 24? If Harbaugh stays, if most of the staff stays intact, and if they improve NIL, then yes. Jorge says, are we looking for any top 300 defensive tackles? And I'm assuming you probably mean like nose type guys. I think nose guys rise in the rankings a little later in the process, but some guys they're in on that are, more nose types, maybe, nose 3 flexes would be like Ethan Utley out of Ensworth. He's more of a 3 than he is a nose, but he's a teammate of Mason Curtis. He's a top 100 guy. He's coming in for the game against Ohio State. Dylan Battle they brought in. He's a top 300 guy out of Texas. He visited earlier this fall. I know they really like him. And some guys rated outside the top 300 worth monitoring. Charles House out of Charlotte, Amir Leonard, Gene Charles out of Nashville. He's visited 3 times. And RJ Hines says, as of today, would you project Alex Graham in the class? That's a good question, man. Alex Graham is, his recruitment's interesting just because he's visited Michigan a ton as an underclassman. Obviously, he transferred from Cass Tech to IMG Academy. When I went out to see him earlier this fall, he told me that he wanted to get back to Michigan, and he still had a great relationship with Steve Clinkscale. He still had Michigan really high on the board. And you see Michigan as the commanding lead on the On3 recruiting prediction machine. But then I hit up Alex a couple of weeks ago. I asked him if he was going to come out to the Ohio State game. He told me he couldn't make it. So he's going to have gone the whole fall without visiting Michigan, which is a little concerning. And then now being down at IMG Academy, I'm just a little concerned that his recruitment, really opens up with some of the Southern programs. So I don't know, man. I don't really have a good read for Alex right now. If you would have asked me this question last year, I would have been like, yeah, man, Alex is going to be an early commit. I'm really confident in Michigan. And now I don't know. I mean, I still think Michigan, don't get me wrong, I still think Michigan's in really good shape, but I definitely think they're going to have to fight to get Alex back to the Midwest and win that recruitment. But that was the last question. So appreciate everybody that joined tonight and asked a bunch of great questions, kept the conversation moving. As always, guys, subscribe to the Wolverine.com for $1 for 1 month. Today, you can get premium insider recruiting information, team information, basketball recruiting, NIL transfer portal, and so much more. That's $1 for 1 month. And you never miss an update on anything that I write over at the Wolverine. And we have a lot of good stuff coming out with the Carter Smith commitment. And yeah, like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free, and we'll be back next week.